Minister for the Gaeltacht on the government decision to cry halt on Knock Airport. And Finglas, a case study in deprivation. Good evening. Later in the programme, we present one side of a divided city, the case from Finglas. But first, that terse announcement this evening by the government that the much publicised and controversial Knock Airport project is to be cut off. And the man at the centre of what's bound to be a major political and regional storm, Paddy O'Toole, Minister for the Gaeltacht, Fine Gael Deputy for East Mayo. Minister, you're talking about postponing, deferring. You really mean abandoning, don't you?
No, I don't think that the statement issued by the government could be interpreted as that. In fact, we have very definitely said that we are completing the earth-moving contract in relation to the airport, and when finances are available, we will then proceed to complete the project. The question of abandoning the project doesn't arise simply because of the amount of money that will be spent by the time the earth contract has been completed.
All right, what about your pet project that you threw out in the middle of the election for an international sports complex? That's out, isn't it?
It is on the basis that that particular project would have been put there to complement the airport and to ensure its viability, or to help to ensure its viability.
Did people go too far, too fast on the whole project?
I don't know. First of all, let me say that it gives me no great pleasure to come here and to have to say that this particular project has to be deferred at this stage, and I regret the decision made by the government, but as part of that government I must go along with that decision. The question of responsibility on me arises, and collectively with my cabinet colleagues. But in the light of what we have been going through in the past 4 months, and in particular in the past month, and I refer specifically to our dealing with estimates, both capital and current estimates, the position is horrific. And let me say that the financial mess that we have inherited has unfortunately led us to having to take this decision.
Sure, let's take this particular part of what you call the financial mess. Did the last government simply give the nod too easily? Did they let money be spent without proper examination?
The last government in this case did not give one penny. They approved in principle in April. They allowed a contract to be signed on the 16th of June, after the election in fact. But the first thing that confronted us in government was the provision of money, because one penny hadn't been provided for this project when Fianna Fáil left office.
What are you going to say when you go back home this weekend and people will undoubtedly say to you, you've let us down, you've let the West down, and Fianna Fáil wouldn't have done this to us?
I am not in a position to comment on what Fianna Fáil might do or might have done in the circumstances. All I can say is that because of the financial state of affairs, we were forced, unfortunately for me, to do what we have done. Now let me say that politically, and I wouldn't be human or a politician if I didn't express my fears for myself, that this decision will have political repercussions for me. But I think there are people in East Mayo who hopefully will understand the
Minister,
position I found
won't
myself
people in East Mayo and people all over the country say the one thing, here is chequebook electioneering falling on your own heads?
People have a right to say that. We're in a democracy. Politicians put their neck out. They make promises, many of them in good faith, by the way, because we had no idea. Even though we felt that things were bad, we had no idea that they were as bad as they actually are pre-election.
You were still promising to spend more money in your own constituency?
Yes, because the information we had at that time, available to us from government sources, that things were not at all bad. And yet, when we found ourselves in government, we found that the truth had not been told prior to the election.
Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, the Finglas report. The main finding of a recent study by the National Economic and Social Council was that 1/3 of Dublin's living in multiple deprivation. One case study in that growing crisis of inequality is presented in this story from Finglas. One example of Dublin, a divided city.
And don't let people tell me that it's not. Because people can see it now. You count the amount of burned cars out here in Finglas. it's going to explode. And I'm very, very frustrated with this, because there's really no one really trying to get to the heart of this problem.
There's people talking about actually forming a vigilante committee. And if that once creeps into the area at all, you can forget about law and order. The law of the jungle will rage then.
The reality is that the injustice is just too wrong, and in itself potentially revolutionary. And if we don't improve the situation, we will find the house will come down around our ears.
Voices of concern about the dangers posed by neglected poverty, inequality, deprivation. It's a growing chorus, reflected in statements by politicians, community leaders, trade unionists, and many others. And it follows the publication of two important research studies. There's a book from Sister Stanislaus Kennedy saying our politicians have yet to tackle the problem of Ireland's 1 million poor. And then there's this report from the National Economic and Social Council saying 1/3 of Dublin lives in conditions of multiple deprivation. Tonight, our report from the Dublin housing estate of Finglas. It's a report on Ireland's growing crisis of inequality.
To understand Finglas and the development of such a state, you've got to sort of look back at the history of Dublin. And that history is one of chronic conditions in terms of bad housing and inadequate incomes, a legacy which extended through from the 19th century into this century. In 1939, there was a major inquiry into housing conditions of the working people in Dublin. And that report, published in 1943, estimated that at least 25,000 houses were required to house people who were then living in either unfit accommodation or living in overcrowded conditions. In other words, as late as 1943, 1945, we were in a situation of a major housing emergency.
Finglas is situated so strangely that it is more like a peninsula to Dublin city than a part of the city itself. It sprawls from the edge of Glasnevin Cemetery into open country, which is as alien as an open sea to city-bred residents. And there is not one Finglas, but two. Finglas West, a compact estate of nearly 3,000 homes, almost all owned by the corporation, and Finglas East, a mixture of 1,074 corporation houses and about as many private homes. The two are separated by Finglas Village, by an industrial compound, and by an obscure and unspoken form of social barrier. Finglas East was developed in a steady line from 1951. Finglas West is still in a state of explosion, at a point of uncertain development. This uncertainty is not helped by the fact that, though 16 years old, Finglas has only recently acquired adequate street lighting, shopping centres, and bus services.
It does get very lonely, yes. Especially if the weather is bad, like you're in and you wouldn't really see one. Like, you're there all the time with children on your own.
There isn't a lot for us to do. There isn't any community centre, or there isn't anywhere we can go.
A lot of boys don't want to go to the test.
A lot don't want to go. I think it's more or less that the freedom like they have, like with the roads. As I say, like, there's nothing here for the children at all to get associated with in regards of playground or a swimming pool or anything like that.
The original planner's doodle of Finglas was attractive enough, but what eventually emerges is an amorphous mass of working class housing, all of the same design and all of the same class. The real faults lie in this, that number one, the design standards at the top and in administration are absent. Dublin Corporation working class housing has changed very little in the last 40 years. Number two, you're dealing with people all of the same class. It's much easier to treat them like an army, to transplant them from A to B. They have very little choice in the matter. Most of this low-income housing is concentrated to the north and the west of Dublin. Hence, you haven't got that interplay of ideas between different sections of people and different income groups of people. If a child is to improve in Finglas, it will be in spite of the environment.
Well, very clearly, if you look back at the early days of Finglas, the priority on housing to the virtual exclusion of everything else meant that the development of the open spaces, the development of recreation facilities, the development of community facilities in general was hopelessly neglected in the interest of getting more houses erected as quickly as possible.
And the houses have multiplied. Today, the population of the Finglas electoral area is well over 50,000, much bigger than Galway or Waterford, nearly the size of Limerick. And in the last decade, 10,000 new tenants have crowded in to Finglas West and South. Young families, many with roots in the old deprived communities of Dublin's inner city. They've left the tenements, they've changed address, but still in Finglas, the basic problems remain.
Oh, the one big problem is unemployment. You know, we talk of children leaving school and coming to a crossroads, which suggests that they have a choice. But for many of our young people, they're coming out over the past couple of years, and particularly this year, and all that's facing them is there's no crossroads. There's just a big grey wall with graffiti like unemployment and dole and no hope, anything you like, you know, which is demoralising really to young people today.
I came out 20 years ago to Finglas with 4 small children. And I read 14 since. And some of them is unemployed. And as far as I can see, there's no work in Finglas for them.
How many are unemployed?
There's... And he's unemployed now, there's... 4. 4 unemployed now, 4 lads. It's not working at the moment.
What are they doing?
They're just going out, playing cards on the fields, pass away a few hours, coming back for the meals and going back out again. They meet their friends at the corner. They start playing cards till it goes dark and then they've nothing to do. Only hang around shops. There's nowhere they can go, there's nothing they can do. There's not even a cinema out here for them.
Have they not tried for work?
They went into Manpower and put their name down. They went to factories around the area and there's no vacancies. And when they went for interviews and get an address, Finglas where they live, they never got any answer to any employment they went to. And we took it then that counted the name of the area, that's why they weren't employed. Otherwise couldn't there always be no vacancies.